Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
And that feeling of rejection and being other was a constant companion to me. So I had to do the work so that I could remember that God made me who I am. I am fully accepted and loved by Him. And then I can move forward into relationships and not fear rejection.
Heather McFadyen is on the podcast. That's right. She is in the building, metaphorically speaking. I'm Julie Lyles Carr. This is the AllMomDoes podcast, part of the Purposely Podcast Network. I just love when I have other women in my life who are also getting behind the mic and doing all the things. And Heather has an incredible podcast that you probably listen to called Don't Mom Alone. Heather, I am so happy to have you in my podcast home today. Thanks so much for making the time.
Of course, always honored to be invited on other people's shows.
Well,
Big deal.
you certainly have a fantastic show that you have been running for quite a while, but take the listener back. Let them know how many kiddos you've got, where you live, hobbies, dislikes, likes, whatever you got. Give us the thumbnail.
So I live in Dallas, Texas, and I've been married since the turn of the century. So that helps me calculate what year, 26 years. And to Bruce. And then I have 4 boys that are all teenagers as of today. So
Wow.
my oldest will turn 20 next month, but 19, 17, 15, 13. And if you want to Venmo me grocery money, the
Yes.
account handle is, no, it's a lot of,
Yeah.
it's a lot of things, and good and hard. And so I've, on the side, the last almost 12 years, I have produced a weekly podcast. And it started off being called God-Centered Mom, which sounds so
It's very holy.
very holy sounding. And that was not the intention. So we pivoted. And I really loved the rebrand to Don't Mom Alone. It came from a listener who was using the podcast to get together with friends, and they would listen to it on their own, and then they would discuss it kind of like a book club. But in the mom
That's
stage,
amazing.
you don't have time necessarily to read the whole book. But you
Right.
can listen to a 45-minute podcast in your week. And it was an excuse to get together. And so I was like, oh, I love that. I love that we're not just all listening to the show in our own little worlds, but that they were getting together. And so, yeah.
I love that idea. I have not heard of using a podcast like a
Podcast
book club.
clubs. That's what we call them.
That
Yeah.
is really cool. That's a new one for me. I
Yeah.
started a book club years ago with a group of friends when I was living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and that book club is still meeting. I love those girls. It's amazing to me. They're still going, and I keep threatening to, satellite in one of these days on FaceTime or something just to experience it again. But it never dawned on me you could do it with a podcast. That's incredibly cool. Look at you
Yeah.
out there just innovating,
It wasn't
innovating
me.
as you go. Yeah.
It
Well,
was a
listeners.
listener. It was a
Yeah.
listener, and I just was like, yes, that is so much better. And sometimes churches do it. They'll take it on as curriculum, and it's
Right.
just a little easier to consume and
Yeah.
connect. Yeah.
That's so smart. I think that's really where we are. I think we're definitely in an era where audio learning, audio connection, that really seems to be the way that people can onboard content in a fresh way. And I'm in some ways surprised. I started my career in radio and I thought, is radio going to continue? Like, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And yet, I think now more than ever, just the way we're multitasking, the ways that we're in which we're trying to continue to get great information and knowledge, but do it in an expedient way. Audio platforms, I mean, they are just bigger and robust and just moving. So, what a
Yeah.
cool thing. All right.
And
All right. Podcast clubs. Cool.
my background is as a speech language pathologist. So learning about language and sound, and then even as a believer, there's something about the intimacy of a voice and right
Yeah.
in your ear that connects people. And so I think that, yeah, radio and all of that is such a powerful tool and way to get information that I love.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. You're right. That's amazing. Well, take us back, Heather, because when you started the momming career, you were doing all the things, trying to do all the things, and probably felt like you were getting it down to a certain extent. And then you had a moment that just kind of broke you. It just said you have been very vulnerable about this, very transparent, and said there came a moment in your mothering career where you had just a full-on panic attack on an
Yeah.
average day, grappling kids. So take us back to that moment And what happened?
Yeah, I think we all kind of have tipping points in life, like where we get to the end of ourselves or our resources. And for me, that was in a season of a newborn, a 2 year old, a 4 year old, a 6 year old. And I was still doing God centered mom, which again, my original intention was I tried the child-centered approach as a speech pathologist. I was really into child development, but I was like way too into it. And then I got so burnt out that I was like, forget it. I need naps and I need mommy time and I need girl time. And I went the other way, and that wasn't fulfilling either. And then I thought, well, what would it look like if I put God in the center and he kind of sorted out the pieces? But instead, people were putting pressure on me like I was the God centered mom,
Mm,
and even had a
mm.
friend who jokingly would call me mother of God, which is so wrong on so many levels. But that kind of gives you an idea of what the pressure felt like.
Right.
And then with 4 little boys, you cannot control them. I mean, you can't control any children, but boys in particular, young boys, are a little more impulsive and don't really care about your tone of voice and don't really they have their own ideas. And so this was a Sunday and we just gone to church. I mean, you would think like, right? You're full of God, all should be good. And we're in the drive-through for fried chicken, Bubba's in Dallas, y'all, so good. Uh and it just came over me, and if you've ever experienced it, panic attacks, it's like they don't make sense. No one was in trouble,
Mm.
all the kids were buckled into their seats, and yet I was just so overwhelmed by the pressures of life. My husband was working a job that he would get 2 hours of sleep at night, so he wasn't really even, not to a fault of his, just the reality of our stage and his stage in his career, he wasn't really available, and so I was just so isolated, although there were people all around me, and I was taking on all of it as my responsibility. And so after that freak out, I remember a friend saying she went to a counselor. So I reached out to that friend and she gave me the phone number. And then I held onto the phone number for a while thinking, I think I'm better. I think I'm
As we
I
do,
I
as
think
we
I'm fine.
do.
It's that barrier to resistance, that like
Right.
thing that we got to push past. And so I finally did call and I finally did meet with the counselor, and it was like the best thing ever. I don't know why we're all so hesitant to say, I need an outside perspective. I need some help in this situation. And just really was like the start of me continuing to do the work to figure out the why I had isolated from letting people in to my life, not just my motherhood, but just what's hard and why wasn't I telling people? Why was I keeping it all in and thinking that I could just handle it on my own with God even? Like, yes, I have a strong faith and I fully believe we have to first say, God, you need to take the wheel and I need to surrender to you, and you have a bigger plan in play and it's going to be messy, but I trust what you're doing. And also, he also gave us people to live in community with. And why was I not inviting them into my story? What was I so afraid of? And the key was I was afraid of rejection. If you
Mm.
actually knew that I couldn't do this well, if you actually knew that I struggled with anger, if you actually knew, then what, would you even want to be friends with me anymore? And so I just had to work through a lot of that. We went through 12 step with our church and through with a small group. I did some inner healing prayer, which was a big part of my journey. And yeah, so happy that I'm on the other side of that. But if you are in that place, I just encourage you to take whatever that first step is. Make that phone call, invite that friend over, tell somebody, whatever that is for you.
We use that word community a lot, and we also use the word isolation a lot. I think sometimes it's hard for us, particularly if we are going out to dinner with friends and we're involved with our church and we're serving in our kids' classroom and we're going with our spouse to work events and that kind of thing. We can think we're in community, and yet I love how you lay out that you were doing all that kind of stuff, but that you were isolated. It's important, I think, to know that you can be very isolated in the midst of a lot of social obligations. Looking back now, how do you define the kind of isolation that you were experiencing? Because I think a lot of people think the fix is I'll just get busier. I'll
Yeah.
go to more activities. I will finally go next door and say hi to the neighbor. But that isn't actually the resolve for isolation. So how do you define isolation today in a
Yeah.
way that acknowledges you can have a whole lot of people around you and
Mhm.
still be very lonely?
Yeah, I think, our old Surgeon General, he wrote a book on this, I think even before the pandemic, but he was talking about the difference between loneliness and isolation. And we know solitude is a spiritual discipline, right? Like
Right,
getting
right.
alone is not the problem. Jesus went away from the people. It's, am I allowing myself to be known? Am I sharing the parts that I feel shame about? Because so often mom guilt gets thrown out there, but I think it's mom shame that keeps us
Mm,
isolated. So the mom guilt is I did something wrong. And I often think we've created a fake line of what good is. Like we've decided this is what a good mom does. And so I just failed and I didn't hit that mark. And it's a pretend mark. Like it's, it's not written down
yeah.
anywhere that that's a good mom mark, but we've decided. So I'm feeling like, okay, I did something wrong. I'm feeling mom guilt. But the worst part is then we say, I am wrong. I am
Mhm.
wrong. Something is wrong with me. And there's a healthy shame, like healthy shame when you've hurt someone and you need repair and you do something about it. That's good and healthy shame. But toxic shame keeps us away from people. And that lie of like, I am wrong and something is wrong with me and who does this, that will not make me want to go to someone and share my heart or share what's really going on. So like you said, you could be at all the parties and you could be doing all the things and you could be busy on the outside, and to me that's not real community. Like I've
Right.
been able to be a part of several different confessional type communities where you show up and you say the thing that you don't want to say to anybody, and then you get to receive the love and the acceptance of those people. So then you leave that room and you carry it with you. And so when that lie of, man, I'm not enough. Well, okay, we are not enough, right? We know that. We'll never be enough. But the lies that say, I am not worthy of being loved, or I am not enough to allow people to see me, you have that feeling of, no, wait, remember that room with those people and they heard the thing that I don't want to tell everybody and I'm still loved and known by them? Okay, that doesn't have place. It's like holding
Right.
on to truth is our biggest defense against the enemy, you know?
Mhm, mhm.
And so even in my book, Don't Mom Alone, I wrote it during the pandemic, which is, there's a longer story to that, but like I wasn't planning on doing that.
Yeah.
That's just when the due date was, and the entire world is dealing with physical isolation, but I think it really revealed the emotional isolation too. And I recognize like, oh, I need to put in each chapter something that's a lie that's keeping us from people, and then the truth that reconnects us so
Right.
that we can say, okay, let's do the work to figure out the why. Because your why, Julie, might be different than my why. And my work that I had to do came from like some emotional wounding from childhood related to, I was homeschooled, and that feeling of rejection and being other was a constant companion to me. So I had to do the work so that I could remember that God made me who I am. I am fully accepted and loved by Him. And then I can move forward into relationships and not fear rejection. It may happen, but I don't behave and react so that I avoid it. It may happen,
Right, right.
and He can heal
There's
if it does.
right. It feels like there's been a real movement recently, and I'd say maybe the last, I don't know, 5, 7 years, something like that, where there is an avoidance that's pretty interesting. We name something that is difficult, like being afraid of being rejected, and it is very painful to be rejected. And yet, rather than gathering tools for navigating when we feel rejected, we seem to try to manufacture environments in which we will never have to experience that.
Yeah.
I have done it, but I am understanding better today. That was never the point. The point was
Mm.
to build the resilience that when those times came, I would have the fuller understanding of identity, the real embracing of who God created me to be, so that when rejection came, I could handle it better.
Yeah.
And I love that you point out that we're going to have these experiences every time we have a human interaction, a human relationship. There's risk. We cannot mitigate all the risk in our connections.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, those connections are so vital. One thing I love that you talk about within unpacking isolation is that sense you were fearful of rejection. That makes sense in isolation. But you also talk about the anger that you experienced, a really deep anger. And I don't know that a lot of people would associate anger with isolation, the sense of having social anxiety, the sense of not wanting to be embarrassed or say or do the wrong thing or be awkward. We might loop that in under this
Mhm.
umbrella of isolation. How does anger
Yeah.
fit under that experience?
I think this is where we each have to do our own work to figure out what's going on. So for me, in my home, I would feel angry, but if even the anger, when I did the work to figure out why is anger showing up, I've never had anger as part of my personality. I've never been, that's not been my driver in the past. It was fear again. It was,
Mm,
because the thing is not the thing. Anger is usually secondary to something else. Sometimes we're angry out of sadness, depression. Sometimes we're angry um, because of that fear. And so for me, it was again going back to these kids are out of control. They're going to do something that makes me look bad, and then I'm going to be rejected. So
mhm.
it's like peeling back the layers. But because I was angry, I can't let you see that I'm angry because that's again reinforcing I'm doing something wrong. I am wrong. What
Right.
kind of mom who loves her children gets angry? So it all feeds into each other. And the enemy's got this like pull on my heart and my mind. And until someone can come in and be like, of course you're angry. Of course you're afraid. Of course. And like shining a light on all those places, I'm going to stay stuck in that shame spiral. And I've just seen over and over again, it has been, yes, my relationship with God and the truth that I get from my security in Him. But it's the people who are also walking with God, who are the light shiners, who are the ones who come in and say, wait, 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 Heather, remember, this is who you are,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So that's where I'm a proponent of community, but I'm not a proponent of a bunch of dinner parties and busyness. I'm a proponent of allowing yourself to be known. And like you said, risking that rejection. But to me, it's that vulnerability word, which is another buzzword we use,
Right.
which, if you look at the roots, means opening yourself up to wounding.
Mm, yeah. I mean, so true. Yeah, that is what it is. Yeah.
And it's like, I always say, Jesus never asked us to go anywhere He wasn't willing to go first. And I
Right.
can't think of a more vulnerable thing than being a baby, which Jesus is willing to do. The God of the universe taking on a baby's body is really vulnerable. He could have been hurt so fast,
Right.
physically
Right.
hurt. And then we know He was rejected by men. And so I can say, okay, if Jesus was willing to go first, it's worth that, vulnerable connection is worth the risk of rejection,
Right.
because I've just seen over and over again how even if I am to reject, even if I feel those feelings, He can heal them.
Mm, that's
I don't
beautiful.
stay stuck.
Right. Right. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And when you know that you can heal, it makes you a little more willing to go out there again and try it again. I think that's powerful. You've had quite a tenure because of the length of your podcasting season. And I'm curious to hear from you a couple of different things. One thing that stands out to you that is timeless amongst the moms who found you all those years ago and now probably have kids who are launched and out, versus some of the moms that you're talking today. Is there a common thread that you often see? And then contrast that with what you think is new today in motherhood, what you see some of these younger generations of moms dealing with that is kind of a different take on things today.
Mm.
So what's common, what's timeless, and what's a little bit new that you're starting to consider and starting to talk about on your podcast?
I think one thing that's timeless that I've found, and I personally have not met this person, but I know they exist because I've heard stories. But the vast majority of women who are moms want to do a good job
Right. Right.
and don't believe that they are. And that is really hard. And they uphold a lot of responsibility that how their kids turn out is up to them. And
All
going back to
in.
the counselor's office, you think about the classic, you're laying on the couch and the counselor said, "Tell me about your mother."
Yeah, yeah, we all know we're gonna be at the end of the day. It's
Where
all
does
gonna
the
come back
source
to
of all your
mom.
problems come?
Yes. Yep.
Mom. So
Mom.
it's not like we're creating this line of responsibility that's out of nowhere. I mean, society reinforces this. Even like if something tragic happens in the news, it's like, well, I need to know about that child's parents, like how could they do this horrible thing? And so we do bear some responsibility, but I think as a believer, I just keep trying to communicate to moms like, you're important, but you're not essential,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is a hard pill to swallow. Like, you really aren't. God's inviting you in to your child's journey, but he ultimately knows the whole thing. He sees it from start to finish. He knows what's going to happen in their story, and he's allowing you to partner with him and show them love and care, but he doesn't need you.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean,
And that is a hard pill to swallow
yeah.
because we do, in taking the job seriously and taking it as a calling and as a purpose, we do get ourselves painted in the corner of thinking it's all on us. You're right. And I do think that's a timeless heartbeat for a lot of
Mhm.
moms.
Yeah, and I want to help release that burden. I think that's timeless, but I think what's different in this generation versus ours, or even our moms for sure, is the abundance of information.
Right. Yeah.
So much information. They could ask ChatGPT, how do I potty train my child? I just saw a video right before I got on here on a lady talking about sibling rivalry, and it was something, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know there was a cycle of conflict, and it's overwhelming. Like, I
Right.
think it's causing them to be paralyzed in their parenting. They don't know, how am I supposed to respond again? What am I not supposed to say? What am I supposed to say? Like, I saw that one video that said, don't ever say this. And I think that wisdom is harder to find. And so
Hmm.
that's where I encourage moms of younger kids, find someone who's a stage ahead of you, maybe a couple stages ahead of you. It's not your parent, that you can get perspective because it's always good to know, like, it's going to be okay. Like, there's not a formula. If you make a mistake, repair is the most important part. Like, um, but I sense that in a lot of the moms that are young, they're looking so badly for what to do correctly, and then they get completely overwhelmed and paralyzed.
You think that you are in the final round of getting all this parenting done. You've got kids who are in high school, you're starting to think about college, and you're thinking, this is it. I'm Julie Lyles Carr. I'm a podcaster and I'm a mom of 8. And here's what I want you to know about George Fox University. It's a different way of doing college. Why? Because yes, it's all about getting a fantastic degree to set your kid up for their future. They have 60 undergrad programs available at George Fox University. But that's not where the story ends. It's also about equipping them spiritually. If you get out of college with a degree, but you don't have a closer relationship with God, that obviously is going to deeply impact what your young adult life looks like. So for your kiddos, I want you to consider, what would it mean for your child to be able to go to George Fox University, where 93% of George Fox students say they now have a closer relationship with Jesus? George Fox University is located in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon. They have 23 Division III athletic programs, and 100% of students at George Fox University receive financial aid. George Fox University is dedicated to their promise. They want every student to be known for who God created them to be. So listen, parents, yeah, you are getting into some of those final laps, but you definitely want to make these last laps count in a big way when it comes to the legacy of your parenting. So be sure and check out for your student georgefox.edu. That's georgefox.edu. I definitely see a lot of that. And I appreciate a lot of the movement in having us analyze, hey, just because we parented this way in the past however many years does not necessarily mean that is the best practice or the way to move forward or how to handle certain things. I see too a lot of questions around what is the age my child should do this, that, the other, cell phone, dating, potty training, all the things, which is very fascinating. I think we've always, to some degree, had that. I mean, let's face it, even in the delivery room, we've got APGAR scores that we're all listening for.
Hmm.
And so we do a lot of that metering and monitoring to assure ourselves that things are going, quote unquote, normally, whatever that means.
Hmm.
But I do think, in a very interesting way to me, there seems to be an even more rigidity to what's supposed to happen when to create normal childhoods for children,
Yeah.
which again, I've always had such a heartbeat for the originality of each child. That's a little tough sometimes. And I have two kids who have disabilities. So I,
Yeah. I mean, I
got
have some
forged in the fire.
neurodivergence in my family, and so like
Yeah.
we're not lining up in any boxes, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're
We're
not,
not.
and any of your strategies may not work in our
Yeah,
home. So,
exactly.
yeah.
I
Hmm.
think too, one thing that's going to be interesting for today's moms is with the advent of things like going no contact and rejecting previous generations parenting styles and some of those
Or
kinds of things.
completely cutting off parents. That's happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I'm seeing it happen. And I'm seeing it happen in ways that I do think there are very specific, but very rare situations in which that may be necessary. But for the most part, just because you don't agree with somebody's philosophy, outlook, or politics does not mean that they shouldn't be around your kids and don't have something of value to share with you. And so I have concerns that some of the wisdom that's been there in the past, where, I mean, for myself, I definitely, even though I didn't agree with everything that my mom and dad did or my grandparents, you better believe I was leaning on my mom, on my grandmother, on their combined wisdom. And even if it was something that I ultimately chose, yeah, that's not how we're going to do it. But I wanted to know. I wanted to know how they navigated this motherhood thing.
Hmm.
And what I'm seeing a little more today that has me concerned sometimes is this rejection of parents that have gone before. Now, I'm sure you do. I know I do. I still get young parents saying, hey, how did you handle XYZ? So I'm not saying that it never happens or nobody ever inquires or whatever,
Hmm.
but it does have me pondering. So for you, how do you look at that when you talk about community, when you talk about confessional community, when you talk about places of support? Do you think that there is value? Have you sought out communities in which there's a wealth and a breadth of wisdom, age, life experience, season of life? And if so, what is the value of making sure you're in community in those kinds of aspects?
Yeah, I'm really thankful. Our church is very multi-generational. In fact, there was a lady, she was in her 50s when she went to seminary, which I'm like, we're just getting started. Okay, Julie, we're just getting
That's right,
started.
girl.
Going to
That's right.
seminary in your 50s. She started the first women's ministry at our church. Like that didn't exist. And a mentoring program called Titus 2. But I was very thankful. I think it was dropping off my third son in the nursery that I met a lady, and she was starting a mom heart group, and she invited me, and I'm going to her house tonight. We're still in relationship, and that was 16 years ago that we first met. And she has 4 grown boys, and it has always been helpful, no matter what stage I'm in, to get her
Right.
perspective. She gets, she doesn't totally get the technology challenges I have these days, but when it comes to like things that I'm overly concerned with, that she can calm my heart about, or relate to like a season, like the season of 4 teenage boys, like she gets that in a way that maybe another mentor in the church wouldn't. And then I'm in a different group. It's my life team, which is a gift from the Lord. My dad passed away in 2017, and in 2020 I was invited to join this group, and there are 4 men in their 60s and 70s, and then 2 gals. One, she also has 4 boys that are grown, and another is more my age. But both of them are counselors. And so it's this group where I can just be and show up and share. And yeah, their wisdom and perspective and care is so vital to what I'm walking through. And maybe they're not telling me like, well, you need to get this filter for your kids' phones and blah, blah, blah. It's like so outside of that kind of advice. It's more
Right.
just usually it's my heart, like my owning too much of something, or my fears or my worries or my projections that need to be calmed. That's what I think a generation before you can do and offer, um, and prayer and just love. So big
Yeah,
fan.
same. One of my best friends is she has 7 kids and she's about 13 years older than I am. And so at the time at which she was kind of wrapping up having babies, I was in the early stages of having my oldest kids. And so we were able to overlap a little bit. But being able to see where she had gone before and the way we could have that back and forth has always been so powerful. And to your point about with your dad having passed, both of my parents have passed and both of my in-laws. And you know, there is something so incredible about still having people in my life who are around the ages of my parents, who are still willing to sow into me, who are still willing to walk with me, even though there are generations behind me who now have kids and are going through different things and on and on. I don't know that we ever outgrow that desire. My grandmother lived to be 102. She
Wow.
basically outlived everybody,
Wow.
but for such a long time, she even in her 80s, still had little ladies at the church who were in their 90s, and she was
Mm,
paying attention to
mm,
how they were moving ahead in their lives. So, that place of really being willing to open up community, to not be alone, not just with our peers and our season of life peers,
mhm,
but to also not mom alone because there are people who've gone before you who have a lot of wisdom. I think that's such
mm.
an important part of building community today. Well, Heather, I love your message. I love how you encourage women to link arms and to make sure that they are not isolating themselves. Tell the listener where they can find the podcast, the book, all the great stuff that you're doing.
You can go to heathermacfadyen.com or don'tmomalone.com. They kind of both work. And the book is on Amazon or wherever you buy your books. And I have a new podcast, a comedy podcast, Julie.
All
What is
right. I
happening?
love this. Tell me, tell me.
My friend Cynthia Yanoff and I, we host, it's a every other week podcast called Sidetracked, because
Awesome.
that is a female conversation constantly.
Yes.
Squirrel, squirrel here, squirrel
Squirrel, squirrel,
there.
squirrel.
But it's a lot of fun. It brings me a lot of joy in this season where I'm like, I don't need to hear your formulas. I just need to laugh, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just need to laugh
Cynthia's
about the
great.
ridiculousness of this life. So
Yeah.
that's
Absolutely. I
it
love
brings
that.
me,
Okay.
yeah, a lot of
Oh, I'm
joy.
so glad you let us know about that.
Yeah.
That's a great
Mhm.
place for listeners to also go and experience more of your life and the things you're thinking about and now the things that you're laughing about. So, well, Heather, can't thank you enough for making time today. So appreciate you. And I'm just so excited for my listeners to get to know you and to follow along with all that you're doing. Don't mom alone. Heather, thanks so much.
Thanks, Julie.
All right, friend, you know what to do. Show notes, transcriptions, links, all the good stuff. That's what Rebecca does for us every week. So be sure and check that out. AllMomDoes.com, AllMomDoes on the socials. It's a great place to find community, like Heather's been talking about, a place where you can find others who are in the same season of life, a few steps ahead, a few steps behind. So be sure and check that out. I love it too when you come over and see me. I'm usually on Instagram, Julie Lyles Carr, and I want to hear from you in my DMs about guests that you'd love to hear from, topics that you're wondering about, questions that you have. That means so much to me when you come over and say hi. And I will see you next time on the AllMomDoes podcast.